Well, it's done. I'm finally done with Dandelion Dynasty. And let's talk about it. Welcome back to Kevin Toll Reads, where today we are talking Speaking Bones by Ken Liu, the fourth and final entry in the Dandelion Dynasty. Let's dive right into some of this. So this book was published in 2022. Ken Liu coined the term silk punk as kind of a subgenre of fantasy. And yeah, it is unlike anything I've ever read in fantasy. And I probably said that on the earlier entries in my reviews, but we're going to talk about that in a little deeper dive here. This one might be a longer one. You may want to speed it up. Who knows? But we're going to dive right into it. And so let's talk about the summary of this thing. So Princess Thera and the Peikyu Takval, they're pursued by the Lyaku clan. They're trying to reestablish peace in Dara. Now, that seems like a pretty simple premise, but there's a lot going on here. Thera has been sent as kind of, I don't want to say tribute, but she's trying to strike a balance between the Lyaku and the forces of Dara, and the nations trying to come to kind of some kind of semblance, but all war and is breaking out, and there's still different factions of Dara that are fighting against the Lyaku and trying to stand up for what is right, and they're being exterminated. And so, all while this is happening, Gia, who was the once concubine of Kunigaro, is now acting empress, and Prince Pharaoh and the Peikyu Tonvanaki are all on their own kind of paths, and they're trying to figure out what is best. All the while, Gia is being very, very manipulative in her ways. She is trying to understand and harness the grace of kings, which we're going to talk about, but is definitely far more manipulative than anyone seems to realize. And what transpires is, can the Dara nation stand against this growing Lyaku, who are just basically hell-bent on overcoming Dara and its lands? Dara's fate, although, will not be decided by the gods, which I've kind of grown to love in this fantasy epic series. This is going to be decided by mortal hands. And so that is the summary of this thing. Let's dive right in and talk about what I enjoyed. And so I enjoyed the last 300 pages of this book. I've got a lot to talk about this book, and obviously I've got some criticisms for this one, but I digress, and I wanted to kind of say that as kind of a aforementioned or a forward, because some of what I enjoyed might delve into also its opposition or its opposite of what I didn't enjoy. So I just wanted to say that with you. Gia, Thera, and Kogo were some of my favorite characters in this story, and that's saying a lot because there is a lot of characters, and some of them come into play in more profound ways, and some of them don't, and some of them, their shelf life in this epic fantasy is short. Some of them you don't get finalization on, and so that is what it is. I enjoyed some closure to this tale. I enjoyed some of the closure to it. Some of the plot lines I didn't enjoy as much. I think this book will stick with me for a while because it hit me in a pretty profound way. Because it took me a long time to get through this book, let's just be honest. And some of that was due to other reading events, other series I was reading, other mood reads and whatnot. I was supposed to get this book done in December. It's now March. I'm finally done. I don't think it's all based on the fact of I wasn't over enamored by the book. I think a lot of it also has to do about some outside influences, but there is some specific things in the book that I didn't like. But we're here talking about what I liked. So let me back myself up into this. I definitely liked Liu's writing. His prose is very, very good. I think it's poetic. His word structure is I think both intellectual but easy to consume, and that's not easy to pull off because I think it says a lot about his writing and his word choice and the structure, how he formalizes words and sentences, and I think he does a really good job at that. I enjoyed the opposition, the Lyaku. I think they were a great add into this epic story, and they were much needed for a conflict. Otherwise, we would be talking about just the Dara nation and its struggles with emperors and empresses and the generational and princes and princesses and who thinks what is right for the nation of Dara. And that would have been not as good, I think. And so I also liked finally getting to understand what the Grace of Kings meant. Obviously, it's the title of the first book and the first entry into the Dandelion Dynasty, but it has a meaning all of its own. And what it means is it's kind of representative of the leadership, if you hold the Grace of Kings, because they talk about it like it's a physical thing, but what it means is it's really to hold the grace of the people. It's basically to be the sign for the people. And when you hold the Grace of Kings, you hold the people's interest in your hand, so to speak. And that's what they mean by that. And I finally, in book 4, kind of figured out what that was. I also think I found out kind of, a little more about really what this book is about. It's really about generational challenges of having emperors and empresses and conquests and family dynamics, but never losing the sight that the emperors have to have what the best interest of the people. So I think there's an underlying theme here with this book in that it's not just about ruling with an iron fist type thing. It's about you have to have a balance of, as a character and as an emperor or empress, to strike a balance between what is the good of the people versus, your own desires. And sometimes that means making personal sacrifices. And that is prevalent in this book and in this fantasy series. And so I thought that was really done really well. Some of those themes I think Lou really knocked out of the park. A couple excerpts, I could have picked a number of excerpts, and that's the same. All 4 books have such great little maxims and adages that you could pick out and choose, and I think they're really, really done really, really well, and those stick with me. Usually that doesn't happen, but I wanted to say that. But here's a couple great excerpts that I thought he really knocked out of the park. The future is not a path that one walks alone. It is forged through the decisions of many, shaped by hands of those who choose to sacrifice, to lead, and sometimes to fall. And then another one was the Dandelion Dynasty is not a name that belongs to a single ruler or to a family or even to a nation. It is a seed that takes root whenever the wind of change blows. I thought those are really indicative of this kind of overarching tale. So let's talk about some criticisms. And I feel like this is going to be long-winded, but I'm going to try to be succinct here. But the overall conclusion was okay. It is what it needed to be. And I can understand that. And I'm still kind of retrospectively looking back at this thing, even though it's, within the last 24 to 48 hours that I've finished this. It wasn't as grand as I wanted it to be, though. I think Lou provided us the conclusion that was necessary for the story that he created. But as a reader, I don't feel like it was enough for me in my investment of time. And I'm not looking at this from an analytics perspective or anything like that, but I was invested in giving him my time to go through this. And I feel like I'm going to start picking this apart, but it wasn't as good as what I thought it could be. I feel like, I don't want to say I was owed anything by Lou, but I felt like maybe there should have been more. Obviously, book 4 is far too long. And the crazy thing is that book 3 and 4 were supposed to be one book. And book 3 and 4 together are like 2,000 pages in total. Somewhere around just shy or right at 2,000 pages. And that's just nuts. But it is supposed to be kind of read as part 1, part 2. And so what was supposed to be a trilogy is a 4-book series and a quartet or whatever. And yeah, that's just crazy to me. This book should be half the length it is at best. There's far too much in there, and I think Luke gets very cute, gets kind of too cute for his own good here. He is a phenomenal writer. I love his short story series more than anything. He is definitely one of the top authors for me, but I think he got a little too cute for his own good. I'll just leave it at that. If you remember, I liked book 3 a lot, and I specifically liked book 3, The Veiled Throne. There was like a 300-page section that was all about a cooking tournament, and I really enjoyed that. But in book 4, there was just a lot of sections about food and there was actually more introductions of characters with 500 pages left of a 4,000 page, a 3,500 page epic fantasy series. And I was like, why are you introducing more characters? We got to wrap things up. Like, I don't even know what's going to happen at this point. And so that kind of turned me off a little bit. So I thought all of those things were kind of things that could have been polished a little better. There's one other thing. It's very heavy about time period, generational jumps, and point of view jumps. It's very reminiscent from what I've gathered of Malazan. The Book of the Fallen by Stephen Erickson that does similar things, but on even more grander scale. But this is a very grand tale. And so those can be very jarring. And I'll be honest with you, there was times like, okay, who are we talking about again? Because I just wasn't invested in that character. And I found myself kind of just reading to get through to see if I'm going to get back to this character or Thera or Gia or, and I hate that about reading. I hate that about a book, but there was some characters I just like, I don't care about this character at this point. I want to know what's going to happen with Dara, what's going to happen with Gia, what's going to happen with Thera. Are we going to have more Garnoffen? There was a lot that still could have been played out. And so before I get off my soapbox, let's go to rating and overall. Rating is a 3.9. I have a lot of dislike for this book, but it's still epic, and I still want to give it its credit and credit's due. So that seems to me like a very favorable rating for this one. I went on Goodreads. The average score is like 4.5, and I just know what people are thinking. Now, there is a lot of other booktubers that posted their own review on Goodreads. And yeah, I don't know what they're reading compared to my, and I get that reading's an individual thing, and so I understand that. But yeah, like, they're obviously a little more intelligent than I am, or reading something that I'm not, or reading between the lines a little more, or understanding some of the themes a little more, because I didn't connect with this book enough to give it more than 3.9. In terms of kind of how I rated the books, Grace of Kings was a 4.5. I thought it was a great book. Entry point, great. Wall of Storms, which is predominantly what most people pick as one of their favorite books of the 4, I thought was a step down, which is indicative of usually book 2 in a series. Usually it's a step down because you get an origin story or you get to meet people in book 1, so you got all that hype with that. And so usually the second book is somewhat of a letdown, and I found it here, so that didn't really surprise me. The Veiled Throne, I thought, was a step in the right direction. I gave it a 4.6. I thought it was one of my favorite books in the series up until that point, because I really liked, like I said, there was a 300-page section about a cooking contest, and I was enthralled by it. I thought it was really great. I liked the characters of it. I liked how they were talking about how they made these little machines to go around with these pulleys and the vines and skin and the bones. I thought it was great, this little engineering pieces. But then this one, a 3.9, is definitely, it's a huge letdown. It is, even though 3.9 is not a bad score. But yeah, overall impressions, for the series overall, it's not traditional fantasy. And it's hard to kind of put a label on this. I was asked about this in a live stream recently, like, what were your thoughts? And like, it's really not anything like, I can't relate it to Lord of the Rings, or I can't relate it to R.A. Salvatore or Wheel of Time, or it just Game of Thrones. It's just not the same thing. There's just it's more of a combination of many different things. If I had to describe it in a way, I would say it's complex like Malazan, that I've never read, but I just hear about everyone talking about it. The prose reminds me of Guy Gabriel Kay and Robin Hobb. I think the engineering aspect, the silk punk, mechanical engineering of using bones and pulleys, and I really think it reminds me a little bit of Abercrombie when he's talking about like kind of like the transition of coming of age and machines in his epic fantasy. I think it has some nods to that a little bit. There's a huge, vast, complex characters, a lot of ancient drawing of Chinese rituals and foods, and it's really unlike anything I've ever read in fantasy. I will say I'm glad I read this. I still think Liu is top tier for me as an author. I think his short stories are absolutely a high recommend. It's hard for me to recommend the Dandelion Dynasty to someone, honestly, just openly, like, hey, if you like fantasy, try Dandelion Dynasty. I think if you like fantasy and you're looking for something, hey, I want to spend a couple months getting just immersed in something and I'm all game and I'm not worried about anything else, sure, have at it. I think it's great. I think you'll enjoy it. And if you're really wanting something complex and with glossaries and terminology and etc., go for it. I think it's great. But if you're looking for just, hey, I'm wanting some, fantasy, old school fantasy or sword and sword, this is not the one for you. So this has been a long one, but I had a lot to say about this book and just overall thoughts about the Dandelion Dynasty. And I hope you enjoy this, and I will talk to you all on the next one. Thanks for sticking around.